Welcome. This is the Enlightenment Show, and I'm your host, Laurie Schoenfeld. This is where Chicken Soup for the Soul meets the artist way with Nancy Drew. Our guest today is Caz Frear, author of 5 Bad Deeds. We're going to be chatting with her today all about her domestic thriller and a time in her life when something wasn't quite as it seemed. Hello, Caz.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us today. We were just talking about this a little bit before the show, that it's 2 weeks before Christmas. Do you have anything fun and mysterious planned for your holidays?
Probably not mysterious. It's the usual kind of routine, isn't it? The treadmill of just getting stressed about things that actually, when the day arrives, you realize don't really matter after all. Trying to get the perfect present and the right food and all those kind of things. But yeah, I've got lots of social things planned, and it's been great because it's sort of tied in with the book promotion as well. So it's been a lovely December, but it's quite full on.
Mm-hmm. I loved your description about the treadmill, because yes, that's a good visual.
Yeah. And every year, it's funny, every year I'm sure so many people are like this. Once it's all over, every year you think, I'm not spending as much next year. I'm not going as mad on presents. We're not doing this. We're not doing that. And then the next year comes round again. And then, we jump on the treadmill again.
What's your normal go-to thing that you tell yourself during the holiday that you're not going to do that seems to repeat itself?
It probably is the present thing, because I do that thing of I am pretty organized. And so I think, right, probably from around mid-October, I start thinking, right, I'll just start getting bits and pieces. And I do, but then I never stop buying up until Christmas Eve. It's not like I'm all done and dusted by the end of November. I am, but then I just keep seeing other little things. So it's probably better that I just do my shopping in a panic. I'd probably spend a lot less, but I like present shopping. I love, that sort of thinking about what, really thinking about what somebody's going to love, rather than that panic buying of it's another candle. And I obviously always gift books to everyone, so they kind of know what to expect from me.
You're the book giver in the family.
Yes, I am. And I was, but even more so. Yeah, even more so now.
Can you share with our listeners and viewers what 5 Bad Deeds is all about?
Yeah, of course. So 5 Bad Deeds centers around a woman, a character called Ellen Walsh, who kind of believes that she's a pretty good person. She knows she's not a saint, but, she's kind of the first person to offer to help somebody, or, she's just kind of, we call it in the UK, a good egg. Just somebody that would do you a favor and will offer you a lift and all those kind of things. So that's the way she sees herself. But she, throughout the course of the book, realizes that her perception of herself is not it's not how other people see her. She gets an anonymous letter in the post, basically telling her that it's about time she learned that there are consequences. And she's absolutely baffled, because she does have this view of herself of, well, I would never intentionally upset anybody. So what could somebody have against me that would, how could I incur this wrath? And as the book goes, it starts off with a few things happen to her that are embarrassing for her, but not catastrophic. But as the book goes on, things get worse and worse. And she's just very much stuck in this view of, but who would do this to me? I've done nothing wrong. But we find out quite quickly that she has, and that intention doesn't always matter, that you can, a thoughtless word or a thoughtless action, a selfish action can have huge effects on other people's lives without you ever really knowing. And I think that's the crucial thing for her.
Mm-hmm. What was the first idea that came up for you about this book?
It's an interesting one, actually, because the germ of the book, I mean, it changed an awful lot, came off just quite a run-of-the-mill experience that I'd had. I was in a restaurant. We'd had really, really bad service, from like rude service. I never complain about anything. I'm one of those people who, you know, at the hairdresser or wherever, I'll always go, yeah, it's great, thank you. I never really complain. And I didn't complain that I didn't intend to complain that day, but as we were leaving, the manager said, was everything okay? And just for the first time in my life, I thought, I'm going to say no, everything wasn't okay. And it was over in 30 seconds. But later on that night, I started to get really worried. And I was just sort of thinking, what if that waitress gets fired? And because of what I said, and what if she just had a really, really bad day, and maybe her husband has just left her, or she's got a family member that's ill and she could get fired, and she might have 4 children, and all this kind of, and that's the thing. It certainly wasn't my intention to get her into trouble. It was just a case of, I was asked a question, was everything okay? And I quite impulsively and honestly said, well, actually, no, it wasn't. She didn't get fired. I went back a few days. She was still there. It was all fine. But that was kind of the thing that's got me thinking about how you could, a very, very small thing that you don't really think that much about, could have huge effect on somebody else's life. And it's a difficult one, because that doesn't necessarily mean we have to tiptoe we can tiptoe around doing the right thing all the time. You know, there's an argument for saying, she had been quite rude and I had a right to say that, but you just don't know what you're unleashing when you do that.
Mm-hmm. So a few pages into your book, Caz, with what you just said about your hair, is that where the cake part came in with Ellen a little bit?
Oh, what? Sorry?
The cake part where she wouldn't say, even if the cake wasn't exactly the way she wanted it.
Yes. Yeah, and that's kind of, and it's funny, isn't it, how parts of your personality will always bleed in to the character a little bit. I think especially Ellen's written in the first person, so while she's not based on me at all, everything about her life is very different to my life situation, but there are things that come out, because I would be the one just going, oh wow, thank you so much for the cake, and handing over the £100, and then getting in the car and going, what is this? I wouldn't be saying that to her. So yeah, there's those kind of things. That's how Ellen sees herself, that because she's a nice person and wouldn't ever intentionally hurt somebody, then she's a good person and she's going through life, and nobody should have anything against her.
Tell us a little bit more about Ellen. Who is she?
So she's a mother of 3 children. So she's a mother of a teenager. So Orla is 16. And then she had twins, and there's a big age difference. They're 3, 4 throughout the course of the novel. So she's kind of going through that thing of, she's got quite a challenging relationship with her teenage daughter, and then she's got these 2 boisterous boys. So she's got this full-on life. She used to be a teacher, and she was on quite a good trajectory. She was heading towards head teacher, then took the time off to take the boys. So now she's a part-time tutor. And she's a bit frustrated with that. She's at the point that she really wants to get her career back on track. She's sort of, slightly resentful of, why is it my career that kind of got put on hold with her husband. So yeah, she's also a wife to Adam, who's a character that does feature in the book. You actually hear from him a couple of times throughout the novel as well. But I think the most interesting thing about her is, like a lot of people, we Brits are obsessed with social class, probably more than Americans, I think. But she was born into a very, very sort of, we would say, lower working class kind of background. She grew up quite, not impoverished, but quite poor. Very bright, went to university, and then married this very middle class guy. So yeah, she was kind of born into one class, and now she's living this life in this beautiful house, and they're financially comfortable, even though they don't expect themselves by financial. Oh, is there some background noise there?
What?
Oh, I thought there was some background noise. I'll just
Can you? If you can hear some background noise, let us know in the comments, and we will navigate that because we want to hear Caz.
It stopped now.
Okay, if you hear it again, hear the buzzing, let me know. Give me like a thumbs up or a scratch.
Right, where was I? Yeah, so she's living this life now where she's quite financially comfortable. But I think, again, like a lot of people, and the book touches on this, can you really outrun your childhood? It doesn't matter if you're wearing sort of quite nice designer clothes and you're driving a nice car and you've got this beautiful house. Are you still that kind of poor kid inside? And I think Ellen carries quite a lot of that. She feels, even though she's got all the trappings of reasonable trappings of success, she still feels a bit inferior to some of the people that she socializes with. She just doesn't feel, she's got that imposter syndrome that everybody can relate to, I think, in one way, shape or form. And that sort of sense of inferiority and insecurity, I think, drives some of her bad decisions definitely throughout the book.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I love what you did with that too. What do you enjoy most about Ellen?
I just like that she's flawed, basically. I did, interestingly, when I first came up with the idea and I started writing, the idea was that Ellen would be this genuinely very lovely person who everybody liked, never really did anything wrong. And so therefore, when the anonymous note arrived, everybody would be just absolutely dumbfounded at how this amazing human being could have incurred this wrath. But as I was writing it, I realized I'm not very good at lovely, lovely characters. And this slight, I don't know, it's like cat. I was going to say cattiness, but that's probably slightly unfair to her. But she's, I just like that she's quite real, I suppose. That she is on the outside nice, but inside, I think actually in the book, she sort of says a lot of the things she does for people, or a lot of the things she offers to do, she's internally thinking, please don't take me up on this. I'm only saying it to be nice. Kind of, I'm only saying it because I want to be a good person. I really don't want to have to drive you to the airport, but I've said it now because I'm nice. But then she'll really resent it. And because it's in the first person, we hear from her. We're in her thoughts, and so that was fun to sort of have the public Ellen, and then what Ellen really thinks about certain situations and certain people.
Mm-hmm. I loved what you did there with her having her own perspective of what she thinks that she is, and then getting those snippets of multiple POV coming in, to have her question different parts of herself and different layers within her.
Yeah, and I'd never done that before. So I'd written 3 police procedurals prior to 5 Bad Deeds, and those 3 novels are all through the first person perspective of the detective. And yeah, there are no other point of views. You see the world through her. So yeah, it was quite challenging to head hop. But I suppose even I think there's 7 points of view throughout the novel, but about 75% of it is Ellen, and everything, all the other point of views kind of revolve around Ellen. But it was quite fun, to sort of present her in one chapter and then have somebody pop up and have a completely different take on what's just happened to her. Mm-hmm. That was quite fun.
Did that stretch you quite a bit as a writer on this specific novel?
Yeah, because you have to, if you're going to do multiple points of view, make sure that each of them have their own voice. And I think that largely comes in the second and third drafts. And certainly when I turned in my final draft to my editor, it wasn't the final draft. I thought I'd sort of nailed it, whereas, you know, some of the notes came back with, it feels like these two characters are doing this, sort of performing the same role in the novel, and can we do this and can we do that? But yeah, it's quite challenging, and it's also quite challenging to keep track of what everybody knows at any given time. That's where my pedantic plotting came in.
So you did plot this one.
Yeah, I've plotted all. I'm absolutely in awe of people that don't really plot. Particularly in the crime thriller space. And there are lots of people who don't hugely and are very, very successful. They sort of start with a what if premise, and they maybe know 3 key scenes throughout the book, and then away they go. I probably plot for 3 or 4 months before I start writing, just really moving things around. I write mini chapter plans. A lot of people I know use Scrivener. I'm just still a little bit archaic and use Excel. But yeah, I sort of need to do it, because then for me, I can sort of see where it feels like it's dragging, and if it feels like it's dragging, what hand grenade can I throw into this chapter? And plotting is such a huge thing for me, because actually once I've done that, the writing comes, well, as easy as it ever comes. It's never that easy. But I find it hard to write if I don't know where I'm going in a chapter. I really need to know what the point of the chapter is, how I want the reader to feel by the end of the chapter, and sort of, the broad strokes of it. I wouldn't be able to just sort of see where I'm going.
Yeah, with my psychological thriller, I had to plot and piece those together, because with multiple POV, the moments I didn't do that, it was almost like, oh, I have to go back to page 20 to go get that detail that I forgot to write on my board, and then it gets lost very quickly in the mix of all the POVs.
Well, I talk to friends about this all the time who don't really plot. And I think the difference is I can spend, in fact, probably in total, I probably spent about 6 months plotting 5 Bad Deeds. Obviously within the plotting I was writing bits of prose, but I probably spent, and they were saying, my God, I just, it must take you forever. But because I plot so much, I think once I hand it into my editor, I kind of know it hangs together okay. There will be lots of notes from my editor with, what's wrong and where we need more motivation, et cetera, et cetera. But I kind of know that it works. And because of that, and that was for my other books, I've never really had a really deep structural edit to do, because I almost do it myself at the start. So when my book's coming back from my UK or my US editor, it is all about sort of deepening character motivations and all that really juicy stuff, rather than, right, let's just take everything apart.
No deconstruction again.
No, not really. There's adding bits in, but there's not huge amounts of cutting, because I think I've been through that process myself, where I know where things are going on for a little bit too long.
Yeah. Did you have a moment when you were writing 5 Bad Deeds that shocked you about the plot line, without spoilers, but that shocked you with where it was going?
Yeah, because actually, completely contradicting what I just said, and I'm sure you know yourself, you can plot all day long, but then something will, curveball. Where did that come from? Or, that's not in my Excel. That's not on my Excel spreadsheet. Without giving away spoilers, I would just say there was some stuff with Zane, the teenage boy, he was always a character, but it wasn't going to necessarily take the sort of midpoint turn that it takes. It's not quite the midpoint, it's maybe just after the midpoint. That took me off in a different direction. And it's crazy now, because I look at the book and I can't imagine the book if I hadn't gone off in that direction. But at the time, that wasn't necessarily, it's almost like for a book, you want to release the director's cut and show readers what might have happened.
The moment of writing your novel, everything's great, and then, oh, what?
And there's that point where you think, oh my God, I've got such a much better way to do this. This is going to be amazing. And you get that euphoria. and then you realize how much work it's going to take to actually implement this much better idea, and the crash from the I've cracked it to, oh God, I've got to go back to the beginning and weave this all in now.
What did I do? You've written multiple mysteries before, 5 Bad Deeds. What do you enjoy and love most about writing your mysteries?
I think it's just always what I've read. It's kind of hard to say what drew me to it, because I've just from under 10, I was reading my mum's Ruth Rendell's and Agatha Christie's, and and obsessed, from the TV side. I was obsessed when I shouldn't really have been. I was probably too young to be watching it, but I was obsessed with Prime Suspect and Helen Mirren and Linda LaPlante. So it's kind of all I'd ever really known, but it was getting the confidence to think, actually, I could do this. And I think I'm trying to remember now. It's probably reading In the Woods by Tana French that was that real of not I could do this, because she's just an absolute, but I really wanted to. I'm sure she's many crime writers' inspiration, but that book just had a really profound effect on me, that you can write great crime, and also it can be beautiful writing, and it can be fun. Like, she's good at sort of funny characters, and it was just everything in one book. And it just made me want to try and emulate, but I would stress try. But I can't really imagine right. I did write a women's fiction novel-ish many moons ago, but I think then it was kind of on trend, and I was trying to catch that wave, and it doesn't work. And it didn't work. It got me an agent, but it didn't get picked up. And I think it's because ultimately maybe my heart wasn't in it. Maybe they could just tell off the pages that I was dying to kill someone, rather than have people fall in love. They fell in love, and then
you're holding back on something you want more. Yes.
Maybe. I remember reading an interview with Lisa Jewell, and she started off in women's fiction, and she said she just realized that every single book, even though it was still women's fiction and it was still sort of marketed in that sense, she said she could just feel that she was getting darker and darker and darker with every book. And now she's one of the queens of thrillers.
What could you recommend to aspiring authors and writers of different ways that they can begin to start building their confidence as their own writer?
I mean, I think it's just that classic giving yourself permission to be bad, really, because it's never the way you see it in your head is not the way it comes out on the page. And I think that's true for 95% of writers. Most writing is in the rewriting and the redrafting. So don't get too hung up on making it perfect, I guess. If you feel that you've got a story, of course, I would recommend plotting it to the nth degree, but that doesn't work for everybody. But I think just keep going, because particularly with crime, but it's probably any genre, it's the second draft where you will start to actually feel like, I'm quite good at this. This character has depth. This, this twist is amazing, and I can make it work because I've thrown the breadcrumbs throughout whereas in the first draft, you're just going to feel like, on a good day, you'll think it's okay. And on a bad day, you'll think, no, this doesn't work at all. But you've just got to keep going, I suppose, and not listen to the self-doubt or not take it on board. I think it's hard not to listen to it. And read, really, that's probably the more obvious one. Just read. And if writing thrillers is your thing, read. And I mean, I did certainly with In the Woods, but I've done it with about 10 of my favorite thrillers, where I have broken it down chapter by chapter in Excel again to sort of see how they've built the story and where the red herrings came in. And I almost kind of treated it as a sort of maths equation or a scientific experiment. How if, you know, I finished this book and I'm blown away by it, how did they get me to this point? So read and sort of analyze what it is about your favorite authors or your favorite stories that kept you turning the pages. Because it's an obvious one, but most people who want to write read, but I think you have to be quite a prolific reader if you want to write, because you just start to get an innate feel for how stories work. Structure. Yeah.
I love the idea, Caz, of going back and almost dissecting the book, but in a way that's appreciating how they went about doing it, to also kind of look under the microscope too, and be able to teach yourself a different skill set also.
Yeah. It's, you know, it takes quite a long time, especially with a book like In the Woods, which is a huge, chunky tome. But it is, you will be if you did that with 5 of your favorite novels, and they could be hugely different writers. I mean, I mentioned Tana French's huge influence on me, but also Linda LaPlante, and they could not be more different. You know, Linda LaPlante is like a master storyteller. You don't necessarily read Linda LaPlante for the prose as such. You read it because it's just a cracking good read, and she knows how to keep the pages turning. Tana French is, I suppose, more the literary end of crime, whatever that means. But if you actually compared the two, there would probably be similarities in how they're kind of building the story and keeping you coming back and keeping you in that sort of, I'll just read one more chapter before I go to sleep. So yeah, analyze far and wide.
Have you ever received an anonymous letter?
Oh, I probably, when I was at school, and sadly not since, received some anonymous Valentine's cards, but no, anonymous letter. I don't think I have. No. And I would be, I mean, I've never been asked that question. And so I've never, weirdly, even though the whole premise of 5 Bad Deeds is around this anonymous letter, I've never really thought about how I would feel. I mean, it must be absolutely unsettling to just feel that there is somebody out there. And the letter actually says, I'm going to teach you this lesson right under your nose. So it's not even, it's not even sort of this distant foe. You kind of would be looking at everybody and sort of starting to question yourself in that way. So yeah, I mean, I can't imagine. It's unsettling enough to get an anonymous Valentine's card.
Who sent this to me that said they really like me, but like I don't get any of the clues they're giving me? Like, no. What is something in your life that has happened that wasn't quite as it seemed?
Oh gosh. God, I might have to come back to that. I mean, I'm sure there's hundreds of examples, but my mind's a little bit blank. I mean, it's not necessarily in a mysterious way, but my route to publication was very, very different to how I perhaps imagined it would be. I ended up, so there's a book retailer in the UK, WH Smith. So it's not quite as big as a Waterstones, but it's probably just sitting below that. And they ran a competition called Search for a Bestseller. And I entered that and ended up winning it, which I never in a million years. I thought I was at the point where I was hoping, God, maybe I might get shortlisted, or maybe I might not get shortlisted, but maybe it's good enough that I might get an encouraging note from the judges just saying, enter again next year, this showed promise or something. So I wasn't, I felt like it was a fairly good sample that I was sending off. But then, I got shortlisted and ended up winning. But it was just a big whirlwind because, as you all know, the kind of lead time for publishing can be huge. Whereas this, I won in January and my book was on the shelves in June in all the. So,
wow.
Yeah. So that was. that was definitely not, and you know, it not in a positive or negative way. It just wasn't what I imagined. The kind of the publishing experience, it was almost like I was sort of thrust this rabbit into the headlines. You've won this competition and it's going to be everywhere. And I was like, oh, okay. Now, so yeah, I think, and there's so much about publishing that is probably different to how you imagined it. But I'm sure I must have a slightly more mysterious answer to that. But if it comes to me, I'll let you know.
You message me later and we'll put it in comments for the viewers.
Yeah. I didn't tell you that really scandalous thing. I completely forgot about that.
We're going to take it to the inner child question segment. Are you ready, Caz?
Okay.
First question. What are 3 adjectives you could use to describe your 16-year-old self?
Impatient, opinionated, when I probably had no right to be because I hadn't properly formed opinions, and ambitious. And ambitious are probably the same, really. I think no different to a lot of 16-year-olds, and particularly 16-year-old girls. I think I was 16 going on 35. I didn't, you know, you just kind of, at the time I wanted to be a journalist actually, and a music journalist, and I was just like, right, I will have hit this milestone, I will hit this milestone at a certain age. And yeah, it's very much that time of I want to get out into the big wide world. So yeah.
Yeah, I have a 16-year-old currently right now, and that you hit right on the nail. 16 going to 35. Yes.
Yeah, I know the world. I've got it so well.
Second question. As a kid, what were you most curious about?
Ooh. I mean, I was always just very, very curious about people, and I ended up going into a job where I interviewed people for a living. So from sort of, you know, what one of my uncles always says, that I was at the end of every, he'd explain something and it would be why, and I just wanted to drill down. But yeah, I was always writing stories about people I met actually, and yeah, was just quite you know, as you get older as a woman, and sometimes if I'm out with my husband and I meet one of his friends and he's known them for 10-15 years, and I find out more about him in 5 minutes than my husband has from playing football with him for 10-15 years. Or I'll say, what does his wife do for a living? I've no idea. And I think even as a child, I was just very, I mean, you could say curious or you could say nosy.
They're one and the same, right?
Yeah. So yeah, I guess that's probably the obvious one.
You're in a very good career to ask a lot of the why questions and do a lot of the people watching. So there you go. It worked out great.
Why am I writing? The why is always really, really important to me. The why somebody has done something. And I always think, and this was the same with my procedurals, I don't actually mind if readers guess the who, not early, but I don't mind, you know, after about 80%, I don't mind if they guess the who, as long as the why is a bit of a curveball for them. So yes, you've kind of noticed that it might be that person, but it's not why you think.
The twist are my favorites of not knowing, thinking, you know, but not really.
Yeah.
Third question. What is the oddest food combo that you've liked and tried, or you've just tried?
Do you know, when I'm on a deadline for a book, I end up eating very odd combos because I just haven't left the house for 4 days and there's no food, and it's just kind of, what can I throw together? That involves me not having to go to the shop, that will take 15 minutes when I could be when I could be editing. So it's normally, I remember eating, because I was desperate for something quite sweet. And instead of just getting the jar of Nutella, which I have been known to do, I don't know, do you call them the same? They're mini shredded wheats. It's they're like little sort of dry wheaty biscuits for cereal. And I just remember kind of with one hand typing, plunging these into this jar of Nutella. And they don't, you would think anything would go with Nutella, but sort of dry wheat doesn't really.
It
but
didn't
in that
spot.
No. But other strange combos. And I've eaten snails, but that's not really, that's just bizarre, whatever you put it with, and I wouldn't eat them again. But when in Paris.
It was a one and done experience for you.
Yeah, it was that. Everybody's saying you've got to try them. So I did, and I shan't be trying them again. Let's just say.
You docked it off your bucket list. So that's good enough.
Absolutely. And I'm not actually a fussy eater. I'll generally try anything, but there was something, I won't be returning to those.
Was it a texture thing or a smell thing or like
a texture thing? Everybody kept saying to me, oh, it's just like like a button mushroom. It's that sort of texture. But yeah, it wasn't for me. And they were covered in like really lovely sort of garlic herby sauce, and that's the only thing for me that made it just about edible. It's like how people love oysters, and I've never really understood oysters. But apparently that's all about what you put on them. But then I think, well, if you have to cover them in stuff to make them edible, just don't eat them.
Just a little snow with a whole pot of butter, then you're good.
Oh God, the memory.
Before we end today, Caz, can you share with our listeners and viewers what living a creatively abundant life means to you?
Oh gosh. Well, everything. I think, my first book came out in 2017, and I still have those moments of this is just bizarre. I make people up for a living, and I get to, and especially when you go to meet sort of editors or agents or TV producers or whoever, and they're talking about your characters like they're real. I still have that moment where I'm sitting there being very professional and kind of nodding along, but in my head I'm just going, this is bizarre. I made those people up on my sofa, and now you're arguing about whether to put them in this scenario or that scenario. So I had such a, maybe interviewing people for a living is creative in some ways, but I worked in the City of London, and I was interviewing people for investment banks, and I just lived a very kind of non-creative life. And I was very structured and very routine, and it was, I worked hard, but it was, this is my job and I do it and I go home and I don't think about it really. Until I go back in the next morning. Whereas I think, the beauty of this is just the ideas are popping all around you. And it's almost like you'd have to live 10 lives to be able to tell all the stories that you want to tell. The secret is kind of drill down on which story and which format I should tell that story in. But I think coming from a very corporate background to now being able to live this very, very creative life where I get to tell stories and also meet really, really interesting people, because authors, and particularly crime authors, are the best.
Absolutely agree with you, Caz.
They are really so supportive, just supportive environment.
Yes. Thank you so much for joining us today. And where can our listeners and viewers find you after the show if they have any questions for you or your book?
So I am on Twitter and Instagram. I'm probably more on Instagram than I am on Twitter, but my handle is the same for both. So it's at Cazzy F Writes, and that's CAZZI Writes.
We'll put that in the comments below as well. And where can they find your book?
So they can find my book in Barnes and Noble, in numerous independents, which you have such an amazing independent bookshop scene in the States. We have them, obviously, but it just blew my mind when I realized that you had like dedicated crime and thriller stores. That's definitely something we don't have. And obviously on Amazon or bookshop.org. It feels like it's everywhere at the moment, so it shouldn't be hard to find.
Congratulations on 5 bad deeds. And thank you for everyone who joined us live. Caz, you are fantastic. We will add the link below as well for this book. It's a fantastic and wonderful fun read for book clubs as well. And thank you for those who have joined us live and will join us on the replay. Remember, as you go about the rest of your week, to find the things that are working for you. You are the creator of your own story. Have a beautiful week. Thank you, Caz. Happy holidays.
Thank you. Yes, you too. Merry Christmas.